In this walkthrough, we are going to set up a GitLab pipeline to build and deploy an Express app to Google Cloud Run. And the first thing you're going to do is start from this project, Langara CI/CD 2. And what you will do is, after navigating to the sign into GitLab, and then after navigating to this project, you're going to fork the project. And it's going to ask you to select a namespace. I'm not actually going to do it because I'm going to work from my own project, but you would select a namespace and then it would make a copy of the project for you to work from. But I'm just going to return to my own project. And then once you're on the page for your own copy or your own fork of the project, we're going to change a few settings. So if you go down to the settings menu and general, and if you scroll right to the bottom in the advanced settings group, if you expand that and scroll way to the bottom, and again, I don't have it here, but above the remove project section, you will see a section for removing the fork. And what you are going to do is you are going to click on that button to remove the fork. It's not the case for this project that you're going to be pushing any changes back to my project, so that's not required. So click on the button there where it asks you to remove the fork relationship. And then the second thing you are going to change on this page is the visibility. So the project that you forked was public, and so the default visibility for the fork of the project is also public. But what I want you to do is change this to private. And again, it's not something I'm going to do. I'm going to be working on the public version of the project, but you would need to change that to private. And then once you get all those settings changed, you're going to return to the Google Cloud Shell environment. And the first thing we're going to do, oh, maybe not the first thing we're going to do. The last thing we're going to do in the GitLab interface is get a copy of the clone URL. So you're going to want to clone it with SSH. So I'm going to copy that URL. And then I'm going to return to the Google Cloud Shell environment, and I'm going to clone that project. And so now I have a working copy of the project to work with. And I'm going to enter the project directory, so cd CI/CD 2. And in the last walkthrough, we used Docker build and Docker push to build and push a container image to a registry. We are going to instead use the Google Cloud Build utility to pretty much accomplish the same thing. The reason we're going to do this is because when we set up the pipeline in GitLab, we can't run Docker commands directly as part of the pipeline. We're going to have to use something else. So in this case, we're going to use Google Cloud Build, but it has the same effect. It generates the Docker image and pushes it to a registry. Just so that you get a sense of how that works, we'll do it once by hand here. So I'm just going to get a copy of the command. And again, pretty much through all these exercises in the write-up, they are all coded using project ID. You're always going to have to replace that with your own project ID. So in my case, it's CPSC 2650. And so we're going to use the gcloud command, the build-s subcommand, and the submit operation. So this is going to submit a job to Cloud Build. It's going to build the container image and push it to the registry, and we are going to tag it with, again, the registry, the repository tag for the image. which is going to be gcr.io, and then your project ID, and then CI/CD2. And this will take a little bit of time to run. So it's going to have to upload the code for the project, and then it will do the Docker build operation. So you can see that now it's building the Docker container. And then finally it pushes it to the container repository. So it does the build and the push operations all together. And we may want to test this image. So pretty much like we did in the last exercise, this image has the exact same structure as the previous one. And again, I'm going to have to update the project ID. So we're going to do a Docker run. We're going to remove the container when it's finished. We need to set the port environment variable so that the app can listen on the correct port. This time we'll run it interactively. We have to do the port forwarding from port 8080 on the host to port 8080 inside the container. So we will do that. And what did I do wrong? Oh. I see 2 dashes on the env flag. There we go. So it just fetched the image from the registry and then it started up the container. And so that's working now. Should be listening on port 8080. So I can use the web preview utility and we should see the application. So it's just the standard Express application. Okay, so that's doing it by hand, at least that's building the image by hand using the GitLab build utility. The next thing is we need to deploy this application in Cloud Run. We did this in the last walkthrough. However, we used the Google console for that. You can also deploy an application to Cloud Run using the command line. So I'll show you the command for that. And I'll just fix up the project ID. And I'll just explain the elements of this command. So gcloud, that's the Google Cloud SDK. The command is run. The subcommand is deploy. We give the name for the Google Cloud Run service, so I'm going to call it CI/CD2. We identify the container image that we're going to run. So gcr.io cpsc 2650 CI/CD2. There's a platform or a flag indicating the platform. So we're going to use the managed version of Cloud Run. There's a flag for the region. So we are going to use US West 1. So that's the Oregon region. And the final flag we're going to specify is allow unauthenticated, and that's what's going to allow our application to be accessible by the public. And so we will run that command. And it'll take, kind of like it did through the console, it will take a few minutes to set up. And when that's complete, it does give you a copy of the URL, and you can just click on that directly from the console. And now you can see So previously what you had seen is the application running in the development environment, in the Cloud Shell environment. But what you are seeing here is the application running in the Cloud Run environment, which we would use in production if we wanted the application to be running and publicly accessible. So those are the steps involved in building and deploying an Express application to Cloud Run. What we want to do at this point is automate that process. So we want to build a GitLab CI/CD pipeline that is going to do the build and the deploy operation automatically anytime we commit a change to the repository of the application. So in order to do that, I'm just going to tidy these up a little bit for the moment. In order to do that, I'm going to open the editor, and I'm going to go into the project folder, CI/CD2, and I'm just going to turn on the hidden files here because we're going to be creating a hidden file. So what we're going to do in the project folder, I'm going to make a new file, and the GitLab CI/CD pipeline definition file is called .gitlab-ci.yml, so it's a YAML formatted file. And I will copy in kind of a skeleton pipeline, and then I'll explain the components in it in a moment. So this is what the GitLab CI YAML file looks like. In this case, there's a default section where I define the default container image to use for the jobs that follow, and also a default script to use or to run before each of the jobs runs in this file. And so the image we're going to use is the Google Cloud SDK image, the Alpine variant, so that's the lightweight variant. And the before script, so the script that's going to be run before every other job in this file, is to just set the project correctly. So again, I'm going to go in here and put in my project ID. Yours obviously will be different, but you should make the same edits. And in fact, that project ID appears several places in this file, so I'm going to make the changes everywhere while we're here. So yeah, that's we're going to set the project ID before we even do anything else for any of these other jobs. And then the remainder of this file defines two different jobs, one for the build stage and one for the deploy stage. So in the build stage, so build is the name of the job. It's also the name of the stage. That's just a coincidence. We could call we could name the job anything, but we would have to call the stage build. And when we are executing that job in the build stage, the script section gives the list of commands to be run in order to build the application. So in this case, it's essentially the command that we just ran at the command line. So gcloud using the build service, and we are going to submit a new build. And also we specify the tag for the generated image. So that's basically the exact same command we ran from the shell. And then the second job that's going to be run, so once the build is complete, then we want to deploy the application. So we have a job called deploy that is run in the deploy stage. Again, that's a coincidence. We could call the job anything, but we're going to run it in the deploy stage. And the script here identifies the gcloud run command. Again, it's basically the same as what we ran in the Google Cloud Shell. So the gcloud command, the run service, the deploy subcommand, the name of the service, the container image, which is going to be run, and the fact that the platform is managed and which region we're running in, US West 1, which is the Oregon region, and that when the application is running, we want it to service unauthenticated requests. So it's a public service. So I'm going to go ahead and save that file. And that is pretty much it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to, or I'll bring the shell back up. And I'm just going to do a git status. And so that's going to indicate that the GitLab CI YAML file has changed. And so I want to add that in. So git add dot. I'll just rerun git status so you can see it again. So there's now a new file in the project, and so I will commit that to the project. So git commit -m, and I've defined the initial CI/CD pipeline. And then I can push that change. Now, what I'm going to do is return to the GitLab repository for this project. I am going to go into the CI/CD section and look at the pipelines. And what you can see at this point is because I committed that change, and the change included a definition for a CI/CD pipeline, the GitLab is now running that pipeline. So it's going to, there's two icons here, one for the build stage, one for the deploy stage. And what's being indicated right now is that it's somewhere in the middle of the build stage. And I can see at this point that the build actually failed. So it was a two-stage pipeline, and normally the pipeline will only complete if every stage completes successfully. If an earlier stage fails, like it did in this case, it does not execute subsequent stages. So we can go in here and have a look at why this failed. So I'm going to click on the icon for the build phase, and I can click on the log for the build stage, and we get a log for every job and every stage as it runs, and we can look through here and identify what the error is. And what it does indicate is that so it was able to set the project, okay, that was no problem, but when it went to run the gcloud build command, the error came back was that there was no active account selected. And the reason for that is we didn't have any problems running this command directly in the Cloud Shell because we were already authenticated to Google Cloud. The GitLab CI/CD service is external to Google Cloud, and so by default we are not authenticated to the Google Cloud service, and so the build fails. It just, which is good. It just doesn't, the Google Cloud Platform just doesn't allow anybody to submit a build request. You have to authenticate to the Google Cloud Platform in order to do that. So in order to fix this problem, we are going to have to create some credentials that we can use in GitLab CI/CD in order to authenticate the GitLab CI/CD service to the Google Cloud Platform. So in order to do that, I am going to return to the console for the Google Cloud Platform. We are going to create a service account that GitLab can use. So on the main menu, I'm going to go through I am an admin, and I am going to go to the service accounts section. And I'm going to choose to create a new service account, and I will give it a name. Let's call it GitLab. And the service account ID you can leave as it is. and we'll describe this. So this is going to be the GitLab CI CD service account. And I will create the account. Now, in the second part of creating the service account, we have to identify the permissions that the service account is going to have. And in this case, we need to be able to run Google Cloud Build. We need to be able to access the Google Cloud Run service. And those permissions are available through kind of several bundles. And so we are going to add those in now. Permission bundles are grouped into what are called roles, and there are a large number of predefined roles for achieving various results. So we're going to combine several of those roles, apply them to this account so that when the CI/CD pipeline runs in GitLab, that process will have all the permissions it needs in order to build and deploy the application. And so I am just going to run through those here. So we are going to need, and there are many to choose from, but at the project level, we need the viewer role. And at the cloud build level, so I'm going to scroll into cloud build, we need the cloud build service account. And at the cloud run level, we need the cloud run admin role. And there is a second role related to cloud run that we also need. We need the cloud run service agent role. And so I'm going to just navigate to that. That is under service management. And what we're looking for is the cloud run service agent. And so I need those four roles: the project, viewer, the cloud build, cloud service, the cloud build service account, the cloud run admin role, and finally under service management, the cloud run service agent role. So all four of those are needed together in order to build and deploy an application to Google Cloud Run. So I'm going to continue from there. And the third thing we are going to need to do at this stage is we are going to have to supply the GitLab with some credentials in order to access this service account. So in order to do that, we are going to create a key that is associated with the account. So I am going to click on the button to create a key. And I just want to make sure that the key type is JSON. And I'm going to click on the create button. And that is going to download a copy of the private key to my computer. And I am going to have to integrate that into the GitLab project settings in order for it to authenticate to the Google Cloud platform. So that's fine. I have a local copy of the key on my computer at this point. Now, the next step is I'm going to open up that key in an editor. And I'm not going to open it up on the video because it is sensitive information, but I am opening up the file that I just downloaded. Just bear with me. Okay. And now I have to configure the project to utilize that key in order to authenticate to the Google Cloud platform. So I'm going to return to GitLab. I am going to go to the settings for the project and specifically the CI/CD settings. And there is a section here for variables. So we'll expand that. I'm going to add a new variable. I'm going to call the variable GCP underscore service creds for service credentials. I am going to paste in for the value. What I am pasting is the contents of that private key file. Oops, looks like I did not get it. Just try again here. Yeah, the contents of the private key file, that looks better. And again, this is sensitive information. You wouldn't want to share this publicly. So I'm not going to show you the whole file. But the type of variable, there are two choices available here, variable and file. I'm going to choose the file type of variable. And what that means is the value of the environment variable is not going to be the actual value that we see here. The value of the variable is going to be a file that contains this value. So it's just more useful for larger files. And the other thing I'm going to select here is I'm going to select the protect variable flag. So we only want this variable to be available on those Git branches that we specify. In this case, we only really want it to run on or be available on the master branch. So I'll click on the Add Variable button, and you can see the variable is there. And so now, when the GitLab CI/CD pipeline runs, it will be available. And do I have to save the changes here? No, they're automatically saved. Then the last thing I have to do is incorporate. I have to set up the pipeline so that it will access the value of this variable. So I'm going to go back to the Cloud Shell, and I am going to update the before script. So in addition to setting the project ID, I am also going to have to authenticate to the Google Cloud platform. And so the command for that looks like this. So again, the gcloud command, the auth package, the activate service account subcommand, and it has a key file parameter, and what we are passing in is the value of this environment variable that we set up. So the GCP service creds environment variable, that contains the path to a file containing the key. And so what's going to happen then, before each of the jobs is run, we are going to set the project ID, and at the same time we are also going to authenticate to the Google Cloud platform. That way the platform knows when we run the build or we run the deploy command, it will know that we have the appropriate permissions to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and save the changes to that file, and we will commit and push those changes. So let's just do git status and git commit -a-m, and I'm going to say I added the credentials. Oh, typo there. And then a git push. And then I'll go back to the GitLab project, and I will go to the CI/CD pipelines. And now you can see it's rerunning the pipeline. So we made that change, we added in the credentials, and this will this will take a couple of minutes to run, and hopefully, if I've done everything correctly, we should eventually see 2 check marks here. One to indicate that the build operation completed successfully, and the second one indicating that the deploy operation completed successfully. You can see these stages as they run. So I'm just going to click on the log file there. And I can already see we're getting much further along. Whoops, can't see yet. But soon we will see that we should get much further along. So it's configured the project, and it activated the service account. Now we can see that things are moving along much further. It was able to submit the build. We can see the build happening. So it's building the image, and then it is pushing the image, and then the very last item in the log is that the job succeeded. So now if we return to the pipelines, we now see the build job passed, and it's on to the deploy operation, and we can watch that. And it's a similar thing. It's doing the config, it's doing the authentication, and then it's going ahead and doing the deploy operation. And then that job succeeded as well. And what you see here is, just like that we saw when we ran the deploy operation directly in the Cloud Shell, is it gives us the URL of the service. So I'm just going to grab that and paste it into a new tab, and hopefully we will see the application. And there it is. So I know that seemed like a lot of work to basically achieve the same thing. Where the payoff for this happens is when we are making incremental changes to the application, and we don't want to manually have to do the build and the deploy operation. So I'm going to return to the Google Cloud Shell, and I'm just going to hide the terminal for the moment. I'm going to close that file. And now what happens if we make an update to the project? So I'm going to go into the views and onto the index page, and I'm going to go back and add a new paragraph here. This is the added line. So if I make a change, I mean, this is kind of a trivial change to the project, but if I make a change to the project and I save the change, what's going to happen now is, if I bring up the shell and do a git status, so that's changed, so I will commit and push that change, git commit -a -m. This is a trivial change to the index page, and I'll push that. And that's all I have to do. So the beauty of having the CI/CD pipeline is I make the changes to the application, I do the commit, I do the push, and then I don't have to manually do the build and do the deploy operation, because that's all captured in the pipeline configuration file. So if I return to the project and go back to the pipelines, you can see that that the pipeline is running yet again. So I made a change to the application, and as soon as I pushed that change into the repository, that triggered the execution of the pipeline. So it will go off and rebuild and redeploy the application without me having to intervene manually. So we'll just wait for this to complete. And where are we here? Yeah, so it's into the build operation. And there it is, building the image, pushing the image, and then that was successful. And if we return to the pipeline, it is off into the deploy phase. So we'll have a look at that while it's running. And obviously, there's a fair amount of time associated with the build and the deploy phase. So for this tiny application, it takes a couple of minutes, which is not a trivial amount of time. But typically what you would do is you would iterate quite a bit in this shell. You would make several small changes in the Cloud Shell environment, in the development environment. You would test them there. And then when you had a complete feature, say, at that point you would stage, commit, and push the changes, and then have the automated pipeline build and deploy the application as well. And is this finished? Yep, so that's finished. So now if we return to the application, and I might have to do a shift refresh here, it picks up the updated application. And so that is pretty much all that's required to implement a CI/CD pipeline in GitLab using Google Cloud Build and Cloud Run.